W.D. Farad was probably not David Ford L. So, for those who don't know, there was an organization in the early 20th century named the Moorish Science Temple of America. It was active all over the United States, but especially on the East Coast, and it was founded by this man, Noble Drew Ali. He was the prophet of the Moorish Science Temple, and he argued that black people were the descendants of Moabites and thus Moors by nationality and Muslim by faith. In 1929, in July, he would die. And there would be a succession crisis in which a series of people would claim to be the leader of the organization, one of which allegedly was a man by the name of David Ford L., which some later scholars and others have tried to identify David Ford L. with W.D. Farad. Now, there's a misconception that this identification was first made in the book They Seek a City by Bontemps and Conroy. This is the 1945 edition of the book, and it doesn't actually mention David Ford L. as being W.D. Farad. It doesn't mention David Ford L. at all. So all it says is, quote, the following quotations from a sermon by a minister of the Chicago Temple of Islam outline certain primary beliefs of the sect founded in Detroit sometime before 1930 by a Negro peddler. And then it goes on to talk about the teachings of Master Farad Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. Now, keep in mind that Bontemps and Conroy were mainly writing and researching in the mid to late 1930s. And in this book, in the pages that come after this one, they're mainly relying on the research of Beynon, which was published in 1938. So these were not eyewitnesses of Master Farad Muhammad. These were academics, researchers, not active in the 1920s. And it's easy to mistake the Moorish Science Temple for the Nation of Islam from the outside because they were active in the same areas. They drew on the same crowd. In some cases, people were members of the Moors and then became members of the nation. And of course, there were rumors about W.D. Farad's identity, et cetera, as we will see. This being a misconception is very likely. Shout out to Dr. Bashir Shah from the Ahmadiyya Fact Check blog for providing me this scan. You can check out his work on YouTube as well. Later on in 1942, in the FBI files, there would be this communication in the federal government under the word here leads. It says, quote, the Detroit Division, from the information reported in this letter, it would appear that the Michigan State Police had confused the Moorish Science Temple of America with the Nation of Islam. However, Detroit is requested to contact the Michigan State Police to determine the sources of the information appearing in their memorandum of June 16, 1942, which reflected that W.D. Farad alias Davis L., 9316 Oakland Avenue, was Grand Sheik of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Detroit should attempt to resolve whether or not the Davis L. alleged to be an alias of W.D. Farad is identical with the subject of this investigation. So the federal government's not sure if they're the same person. They're trying to figure out if it's the same person, but you can see that they actually confused the Michigan State Police anyway had confused the Moorish Science Temple with the Nation of Islam. So this is an internal communication trying to settle that contradiction, but they don't actually ever determine that they're the same person. Later on, scholars like Carl Evans would determine or would, say in their book, The Messenger, The Rise and Fall of Elijah Muhammad, that they were the same person. He just assumes that they're the same person. This is on page 87, where he speaks about David Ford L. And there is this interesting episode, page 88, page 89, where during the succession crisis, the police would attack the Moorish Science Temple of America. And, quote, as retribution for what he called the unjust attack on the MSTA, Ford L. swore that he would bring America to its knees in the very near future. On October 29th, 1 month to the day of the indictment, the stock market crashed, and Ford L. said that the crash proved that he was the reincarnation of Noble Drew Ali. Pretty badass, honestly. And you kind of wish this was W.D. Farad, but unfortunately, we don't have the evidence for that. This is the book by Patrick Bowen, History of Conversion to Islam in the United States, Volume 2, where Patrick Bowen points out that Farad probably wasn't David Ford L. because Farad was in San Quentin until May 27th, 1929. Noble Drew Ali died on July 20th, 1929. So that's less than 2 months, and it wasn't enough time for W.D. Farad to move from California to Chicago and Detroit or wherever and become a leading member of the organization and then take charge or try to take charge of the organization. This is less than 2 months, and for him to kind of rise up the ranks and then be a contender for succession is just very unlikely. We don't have evidence of Farad in Chicago in 1929. We do have evidence of him showing up there in 1930. So there is on the 1930 decennial census, he's listed as William D. Farad, clothing salesman, staying at the Madison Street Hotel, and we know that he used to stay in hotels. And in the same week, on April 28th, 1930, Farad had sent a box of self-threading needles to his ex-common law wife, Hazel Barton, and it was postmarked April 28th, 1930. Um, and yeah, addressed to W.D. Ford in Chicago. And we know that he used to use the alias Ford. Please go to my video. Wallace D. Farad was Wallace D. Ford, or just keep coping in the comments is fine. I mean, it gives, traction to these videos. Now, some people say that this man in the top left corner is Master Farad Muhammad because they see a light-skinned man. This is actually Aaron Payne Bey. Shout out to Muhammad Al-Ahari, who pointed this out to me. But Aaron Payne Bey was in the Moorish Science Temple. He was nearly murdered by fellow members in 1929. This scan over here is from Anton Beatty's book, W.D. Farad's First Footsteps in America. This picture was actually, so you can actually see Aaron Payne Bey's name uh, in the in this photo, and when it originally appeared, and this photo was also taken in October 1928, which so this is actually the time where W.D. Farad was imprisoned in San Quentin at this time. So it's impossible for Farad to have been in this photo. For what it's worth, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that Master Farad was never a follower of Noble Drew Ali. This is in the 1960s Newsweek interview where someone brings up the They Seek a City, Bontemps Conroy book. The reporter brings it up, and then Elijah Muhammad said, no, he was never a member of the movement, nor was he ever a follower of Noble Drew Ali. So that's always been the nation's position. They've always denied the association. They just say that Noble Drew Ali was a forerunner to Farad, and that he was a smeller of Islam and didn't have enough knowledge to go ahead with it. Now we know that Elijah Muhammad used to visit the Moorish Science Temple, at least according to his brother, Supreme Minister John Muhammad. He said, quote, now a lot of people say Elijah Muhammad was a member of the Moorish Americans or was with Noble Drew Ali. Now I have heard him say that he used to visit there, but I never heard him say that he was a member there. I don't know unless someone showed me some handwriting where Elijah Muhammad or Elijah Poole joined the Moorish Americans. Okay, so he used to visit there, but no proof that Farad was there. Some conclusions. There was probably some legitimate confusion because number one, Noble Drew Ali dies shortly before the nation begins. So as one goes, the other one comes. It almost looks like there's continuity, but there isn't. The early Nation of Islam drew from the same crowd as the Moorish Science Temple of America. This is clear. Elijah Muhammad was circling in Moorish Science Temple congregations and cities, and you also see a lot of the early members of the Nation of Islam had that last name, Bey, from their time in the Moorish Science Temple of America. You know that like Fat Joseph's father was a Moorish American before joining the Nation of Islam. So they're drawing from the same crowd, and there was a lot of overlap in the teachings. W.D. Farad also used many aliases, and sometimes it's hard to trace. Was he Ford L? It sounds similar. Was he not the same person? But hey, I mean, when you're using over 80 aliases, it's easy for people to get confused. Number four, Farad's movement can be difficult to trace. So I do have a timeline of where he was and when he was there, but there are gaps. There are months in between where it's difficult to know where he was exactly. And he was someone who was moving around the country very quickly and very frequently. So yeah, I can see why the confusion happened. At this point, the evidence does not suggest that Farad and Ford L are the same person. The two were merged later on by uncertain reports. The FBI wasn't sure. Bontemps never actually says they were the same person. Farad was in prison till shortly before Noble Drew Ali's death, right? There's not enough time for him to come out, move to Chicago, become a leader of the organization. It's too short. It's less than 2 months. We know that there were already Garveyite and Black Muslim influences in San Quentin. We know that from Patrick Bowen's research on Lucius Lehman. He was the so-called Mufti of San Quentin, and he was a Black Muslim. and he was there just before Farad was there, and he said that the black population in the prison was mostly Garveyite, and he had some influence among the prisoners. So Noble Drew Ali never had to necessarily study more science to know about, Black Islam and Garveyism. He could have been exposed to that in the prison, and it's likely that he was. Number four, the nation has always denied that Farad was Ford. That's been a consistent position of the Nation of Islam. And number five, Aaron Payne Bey was not W.D. Farad. This picture was taken in 1928. Farad was not there in 1928. And yeah, I mean, we know who this person is. He's a public figure. There are many pictures and records of Aaron Payne Bey that you can find on Ancestry and other sources. Thank you for watching. As always, I always bring the receipts. You can always buy me a coffee because that does help me pay for newspaper subscriptions. It helps me pay for books. And it helps me keep going with these videos because it is time consuming to put all of this together. So I would appreciate that. The link is in the comments. And of course, you can always check out my research with all the receipts, W.D. Farad, The Man, Myth, and Mystery Behind the Nation of Islam by John Andrew Morrow and Bilal Muhammad. With that, I bid you all farewell. Assalamu alaikum.